Resident Evil as a franchise is something I've let pass me by for quite some time now. Nothing personal. Not like I'm suppressing the seething resentment for game franchises established on the Earth's soil before I was. I always find myself markedly trepidatious to step into a franchise that's begat enough children to populate a rural one-room primary school. Okay, actually I tell a lie, I did play Resident Evil 5 with a friend back in my middle school days. I only really remember a bloke with a bag on his head, with a chainsaw, and then sometime later selling the game without many tears shed. I actually did buy Resident Evil 4 for PS4 when it was on sale a little while back, but I actually failed to start the game, probably too busy kissing busty women on the mouth or something. But what drew me to Resi 7 wasn't just the tasty prospect of not having to give a shit about other Resident Evil games, but the radical style shift so radical, even calling it a Resi game is a little bit suspect. I'm a horror man, and Resident Evil 7 sure promised horror. So let's get into it. Yeah, this review's a little bit late, but hey, you know Halloween's coming up. Might be looking for a Halloweeny game. And there's the Gold Edition coming out soon. Yes, let's go with that. In Resident Evil 7, you play as Ethan Winters, a local stud who might as well be made of polystyrene. He sure takes grievous injuries like one. His wife went out and vanished about 3 years ago, and now he's gotten the LOL had a few please pick me up email. Now he's on route to rural Louisiana to... Wait, just a triangular helmeted moment? Isn't that the stench of Silent Hill 2? Okay, beyond that similar premise, isn't similar to shh. No, Resident Evil 7 pulls Ethan into the heart of a real conspiracy involving a family of freaky rednecks that are pretty much the Sawyer clan if they'd vacation in Raccoon City during its darker times. Ethan must find his lady friend and escape. I have to say, first impressions on Resident Evil 7 are rock solid. It doesn't take its time establishing its freakier elements, but the atmosphere that gradually builds is nonetheless enticing in a very Texas Chainsaw sort of way. This verve towards straight horror is helped out by the game taking a gameplay direction more akin to the run and be ran after horror of Outlast, Amnesia, and their 3 million derivatives. But two big distinctions pop up. One, the player actually has a greater defensive capability than a chocolate chip cookie in a fat camp in the form of an actual gun. And two, getting caught by the roaming horrors isn't a game over. Surprisingly though, the tension remains high, especially because Farmer Diddles and his family aren't all that offended from taking several shots to the head and chest recently, and shaking them off your tail is actually difficult. This is about my 4th time through the game, and it's honestly tense every time. It's funny to think that the supposedly tense moments of Resident Evil 6 were these overblown, explosive affairs. Apparently I didn't play it. But being chased around a coffee table by a surly farmer with a spade surpasses all of them, and it's in those moments Resident Evil 7 shines the brightest. Okay, but if the gun doesn't so much as tinkle their ribs, then why do we have it? Oh, well, basic enemies, of course. Yeah, those guys. How could I forget? Honestly, whenever the game broke its tense silence with these big lumpy teddies, it was a relief, honestly. Partly because I could deal with them, partly because they're not really scary. They lurch around dozily and have to schedule each individual attack a week apart, so dealing with them is more of an annoying resource drain than anything. Which makes it doubly a shame when the second half of the game begins to exclusively focus on them, and the game really starts pouring on the ammo and resources, dropping most survival horror pretense. I began using a remote bomb in practically every encounter since they were introduced, and I still had enough left over at the end of the game to decorate the Christmas tree. Since we're being critical, Resident Evil 7 loses steam as it goes along. The game is at its peak when it's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but that only exists for like the first third of the game when Farmer Diddles can jump out of the kitchen cupboards. The second family member to evade is much more of a standard duck on a wire type of patrol with about as much depth perception. After that, you might as well put your feet up because the game lacks any effective horror after that, tipping its hat more towards action while forgetting that it left its controls in a horror game. Actually, hold off until after the second boss to put those feet up, because after that the tense roustabouts decline into I don't even know. Shoot the weak points. It's either that or a quick time event. One constant challenge, though, is the inventory management, which is, I guess, supposed to be good and kind of stressful, but being unable to retrieve discarded items is a bit of a pisser no matter how you put it. Fortunately for Resident Evil 7, that's also the stretch of the game where the story actually gets pretty engaging and helped pull me through when the corners of slime ghouls weren't looking too tantalizing. It strikes a good balance between the tones of Texas Chainsaw 1 and 2, knowing when to be menacing but also when to have Farmer Diddles chase you in a car, cackling obscenities the whole way. I did play Resident Evil 7 in earnest, which is always a good sign for a game, and the decline is certainly not a deal breaker, and on the whole there's a whole lot more to like than to loathe. I found the puzzles and exploration enjoyable during my 8.5-ish hours in the swamp, and there are a couple details I really like the fact that you could play the VHS tapes. That won't just show you a cutscene or something like that, but you could play through them, and they would give vital tips for progressing, and also being a fun little aside from the tension. Another thing I liked was how you could go out of the way to find these antique coins. Yeah, sure, you risk hanging around Farmer Diddles a little bit more, but you could use these for upgrades, so they're actually pretty useful. I mean, pretty useful. You could get through the game without them easily, but, you know, still it's a nice option for those exploring types. So I like Resident Evil 7, but this also comes with the qualifier that I'm not a Resident Evil fan. And it seems my favorite bits in Resident Evil 7 are the rather un-Resident Evil ones. It did generate some interest in the series for me though, so I'll probably go up and fire Resident Evil 4 at some point. Of course, I don't know if I want to get too invested given the franchise's track record, which means after this game we're due to 2 more lame sequels before another soft reboot. But for now, if you're looking for a decent spook 'em up this Halloween, you can definitely do a lot worse than Resident Evil 7. Pretty much the final word. Except for this one. Miralax!